are you supposed to be there, right? So did you do everything you were supposed to do to be there? Do you have the right education? Did you take the right training? Have you had the right jobs? All of those things are critical and crucial out there when you're thinking about whether or not you have what it takes to be a CISO. And so there are things that we have to do above and beyond everybody else to make sure that we are, we meet the requirements. We have to have the right schooling. We need to make sure that we've had the right roles. And then, again, for us, I mean, there's always the challenge of, are you too technical? Are you less business? Do you understand, what it takes to be in the role? And do you have the business acumen to, interact in the C-suite? I think it's all of those things together, and it's more than just that. I said in a conversation with somebody a few weeks ago, my counterparts can have a high school diploma, and they're okay, whereas I have to have a master's degree. And sometimes I've even seen people with African Americans with PhDs just to support the ability to be the CISO. So, I mean, we always have to go above and beyond. We always have to be proving ourselves in various ways to perform the role.
Fantastic points. Thank you. Gary, will you please weigh in?
Yeah, I love Nicole's comment. You absolutely have to check all of the right boxes, right? One of the things that was interesting in my career, even after checking the boxes, is having the business knowledge, right? And so, early in my career when I was at Super Value, and which is a retail grocer, and didn't have a lot of grocery experience, had run big manufacturing facilities, had done global roles, had done, unbelievable projects. And one of the guys that didn't have a high school degree, right, but been in the business for a long time, said to me, well, geez, if you haven't cut the meat, you don't know the business. I'm like, what do you mean I haven't cut the meat? So if I haven't been a butcher and cut the meat, literally cut the meat, I didn't know the business. And so I learned how to cut the meat. And then when I finished learning how to cut the meat, then I learned about the pharmacy. And so it gave me the opportunity to really know the business. So when they want to go deep in what makes your business unique and special and different, you can talk the right language, because it's all about being able to talk the right language. And so it gave me an opportunity to move from being the smart guy on the block that knew the technical side to the smart guy on the block that also knew the business.
Thank you for that, Gary. I was talking on mute. Meredith, I'd love to hear your perspective on the current question.
I finally made it in, so hopefully everyone can hear me okay. I can say that my experience has been very similar to Nicole's, and I think that we're always asked to know more, be more prepared, be more educated, be more certified, and really just kind of rise above what some of our counterparts have had to come to the table with. And so that's been a kind of a consistent message along the way. I think similar in terms of trying to prove and show that you belong in the room, that you understand the technical pieces, that you understand the soft pieces, because that kind of goes along with the role as well. And how do you leverage those in spaces while you're also kind of fighting against some of the stereotypes that come along with those of us who are in these roles and have this skin. And Nicole and I have talked about the whole angry Black woman thing. So, we have to kind of rise above that and get past that particular perspective.
Nice, thank you. Michael, could you please close us out on this specific question?
Yeah, no, and again, totally aligned with everything that you've heard right now. But the interesting part is, and I'll go with where Gary is, started us on, by having all of those additional experiences and being the butcher and the head of the pharmacy and having worked in those other elements along the way, you also are a much more experienced, and you're also much more, in my opinion, totally qualified, individual in order to take on the task. And so those experiences, though they aren't the same level of hurdles that others would have, it's no different. It totally makes us, more than qualified, to be able to execute. And it's about getting the right representation and the ability with some of these organizations, and sort of cracking through that ceiling. That's the critical part.
That's a fantastic closing point that actually leads into the next question. When we consider the continuous threats and external adversaries that as cyber professionals as we face, we understand that fighting them requires a multidisciplinary approach. So building a diverse team of people creates a more holistic view of the problem and delivers unique yet different and valuable problem solving skills. So in that way, diversity truly does, improve the overall outcome of a security team or an IT team in general. So Gary, I'm going to direct this question to you. What are some unique values that African Americans bring to the CISO role and to the cybersecurity field in general?
Yeah, so it's a great question. As I think about it, as a diverse person, one of the things that I always think about is we have the ability to feel comfortable in an uncomfortable situation. And for the majority, they never have to worry about that. So going into a boardroom and being the only person, going to a meeting and being the only person that looks like you, every time that a Black situation comes up, everybody pivots to you and asks you, what do you think? Right? So that's a uniqueness. And as you outlaid the question, right, and we think about our teams, it's highly important to bring a diverse team to the problem because you'll come out with a better answer, right? As smart as this panel is, we don't have all the answers, right? So how do we bring and pull together the right teams that's going to give us perspectives and blind spots, that we just don't see, right? Because of our experiences. There'll be blind spots that I will never see that a woman on my staff will see. There'll be blind spots that I'll get a chance to learn about that a person that has a different ethnicity or grew up in a different part of the world, a global perspective, right? So I think as we think about our teams and the ability to solve problems, is how do you get all of those slices to work well together and feel comfortable working well together to bring out the right solutions.
Great points, all great points. Meredith, can you weigh in as well?
Yeah, I think that diversity is, of course, extra important as we're starting to look at being innovative in the space. And I think the processing that we do and the knowledge and skills that we bring to the table comes from our socialization, our education, our experiences, things of that nature. And I think one of the skills that we as African-American Black folks come to the table with is just not being really afraid of the challenge. I mean, we have been challenged in probably different areas of our socialization from the time that we were kids. So I think moving into these spaces that may be tough conversation or a courageous conversation that we have to have with somebody, we don't shy away from those kind of things. And I think we bring that to the table. I think the other part is our ability to be able to morph. I feel that I've had to morph myself in different instances into what is needed at the time. And I think I flex that very easily. And then for those of us who have had to do that throughout our career, whether we call it code switching or whatever the case is, but you adapt yourself to the environment or the audience. And I think that we do that very well in these instances. And I've had to employ that, over periods of time, just so I can bring my diverse view into the room. I might have to state it differently, say it differently, provide different details depending on who my audience is. So I have to morph myself quite frequently. And I think that's an important skill that I think we possess.
You brought up a great point, and it also brought me to think of a conversation you and I had and Nicole had earlier before the panel began, an overview of a situation, an example that I'd like to hear you share with the story, that story, because I thought it was extremely impactful about you when you were a keynote speaker and
Yes.
someone asked you
Yes.
coffee. Can you share that story with
Yes.
us?
Yeah, so this is my get me some coffee story. So again, we tend to have experiences that I believe our counterparts that are not of color they don't have these experiences. They don't have to experience these things. And so there was an instance where I was the keynote speaker for a small conference. It was probably 50 people in the room at the most. These were all privacy security professionals. And they had none of my pictures. You know, my name is Meredith Harper, so you don't necessarily look at my name and think that I'm an African American woman. So all of the literature did not reflect who I was. And when I walked into this room, it was a room full of Caucasian men. There could have been one woman in the room who was also Caucasian. I walk in as the African American woman, and a gentleman turns around and asks me to get him some coffee. So at first, when he said it, I kind of stepped back and said, okay, you want me to do what? And he said, you know, I'm glad you're here. I need you to get me some coffee. And I said, okay. So I went and got him the coffee. And I brought the coffee back, gave it to him, and continued to put my stuff in my seat and get myself situated. They called me up as our keynote speaker for today. And the look on his face was of sheer embarrassment, for lack of a better word, but embarrassment. He didn't really understand why I got him the coffee. So got through the presentation. Afterwards, he came up to me, very apologetic. I get it. He very apologetic. And he kept asking me, well, why did you get me the coffee? And I said, well, I'm a PK, preacher's kid. I was raised to help and assist people. You asked me to get you some coffee. And so it was no big deal for me. I went and got the coffee. I said, but let me ask you the question. Why did you ask me? Why was that the first thing that you thought about when you saw this African-American woman in this room with your colleagues and your counterparts? Did you believe that I didn't belong there? And so we started to have this dialogue around that. Was definitely his perception. He thought I was there to support the meeting as someone who worked for the hotel, not necessarily someone who's there to present. So it's really confronting those stereotypes that walk into the room before you can even get in the room fully. And when I walk in, my skills don't walk in first. My role doesn't walk in first. Who I work for doesn't walk in first. But what walks in first is this African-American woman. And then we start to layer everything else on top of that. So I think that there was an opportunity there that I think that we all have to take from time to time to create an educational moment for those who are sitting in a space of ignorance around our belonging in these spaces and providing value in these spaces. How do I educate you better about that fact that we do belong here? And so it opened up that arena for some dialogue.
And thank you for sharing that story. I really do appreciate that. That was one that was very significant to me, and that also, that brought back into the discussion in terms of perception, right? And that was one of those perceptions that you were able to overcome. Mm-hmm. Nicole, I know you shared some examples of perception and also values that you bring to the CISO table. When I believe, I don't want to tell your story, but when you were in a boardroom, I believe it was, and nobody knew who you were as a CISO.
Yeah, so I mean, I could tell that story like 3 different ways. I am, fortunate to be an African-American woman, right? So I have 2 things that when I come to the table, it's like, oh, so is that the secretary or is that the analyst? Not that I'm the CISO. And so I've had several of these situations where, we walk into the room, I'm walking in with my team, and everybody, it seems like everybody at the table could be the CISO but me. And, we sit down and they don't know, obviously they haven't done enough research, so they don't know who's in the room. And they greet everybody at the table but me. And when they do greet me, it's last. And so, I chuckle a little bit because my team is like, well, as we're going around doing introductions, it's like, oh, so that's Nicole Ford. She's the CISO. And, the whole room, they're like, oh, and it becomes this aha moment. And, it's a little uncomfortable for people at times, right? And I've had that happen in 10 different ways. but you know, it's something that happens. It happens less now because LinkedIn really helps people to do their research. So before you walk in, hopefully you know who the CISO is, but I've had a couple of issues in the past. You know, what I think is that as African Americans, we're more resilient. We bring a lot to the table. We're more resilient. We're problem solvers. We deal with uncomfortable situations just by virtue of being African American or Black. So we're comfortable in the space where there's ambiguity, and that shows in the way in which we make decisions. Remember, the cyber threat landscape is evolving every day. So there's a lot of unknowns. And so when you think about what skill set does the African American or African American bring to the table, we're used to that ambiguity in some ways. And we're used to bringing other people in and listening to other people's views. So really diversity, and hopefully we build teams that are diverse around us, because that's where we know we're going to get the right thought leadership at the table to make the right decision. And that's really important in our line of work. So I think there's so many things and so many characteristics that we have that are so important to the roles that we play, especially today as cyber has become increasingly important.
Thank you again for all of the points. Michael, I wanted to top it off with you. You and I shared a conversation of when you first got the CISO role at McKesson. It was that double take moment for some folks within the industry. So I'd love to get your perspective on perception and the values that you bring as an African American in the CISO role and into the cybersecurity industry in general.
Yeah, no, again, that double take moment, I think was, you know, on one hand, extremely positive. So all of the people that I see that is in your attendees list and those that I've had either some experience and exposure to, definitely high five. Colleagues that I know, and Nicole and, Gary and others here, they recognize, and it's kind of like a witness and a testament. The McKesson environment is kind of interesting. Just as Nicole discussed, they've done an excellent job of making sure from a diversity perspective, my face is on everything. So we have, when there's org charts or, our teams are presenting, they try to make sure that there's, and that's how you walk the talk. Because if I come in and my org chart, I'm it, there's a problem. And if there's only no females on it, there's a problem. So they're not trying to hide behind it. So that dual-edged sword was, yeah, wow, there's a brother that's now, in the top seat in one of the top organizations from a, security program perspective. And you do get the, man, how did that happen conversation? But in most cases, there's at least a recognition. And from my perspective on the internal side, totally positive that the organization is putting their money where their mouth is, by making sure that there's pictures and that there's, on the leadership, and to show that there needs to be, a stake in the ground to make more things happen. So.
You all gave an amazing point of views, great examples. Thank you. What that actually led to my next question was, what do you see as factors that alter the interest levels within the future of tomorrow's African American security leaders and technology leaders? I'll direct this one to start us off with Nicole.
Wow, that's a loaded question.
You got the heavy one with.
I know. Did you see that? Like, you guys should have went first, right? So, oh man, we talk a little bit about recruitment, right? And I know that we had a discussion about how do we make cyber more attractive to young people, especially other African Americans, and even minorities, let's say brown people as well. there's a lot to that. And I know, Meredith, I don't want to steal your thunder because you did a really good job of kind of answering this last time around, we have to start early, right? And we have to start in, elementary and middle school. And they have to see people like us, right? So, I have an increasing responsibility, as with all my colleagues on the, as a part of this, that I need to be seen, right? People need to see that it's possible. And they need to understand that there's a viable career path. In the African American community, there are certain roles that have more prestige, right? So if you're a doctor or a lawyer, those are things that we push our children to. But technology isn't something that we're steering our kids to. I think that there are organizations out there today that provide support in the STEM fields of really trying to get African Americans and minorities involved. And I know that we've mentioned ICMCP before, or BDPA, or SMF, and I mean there's a ton of different organizations out there. I think it's up to us to support them. I think that we have to stay involved. People have to see us. We need to, I go into the schools, just like I'm sure all my colleagues do, to talk about careers in STEM, career in tech, specifically in cyber. And I can tell you, it does make a difference. Being a former professor, and I used to teach cybersecurity classes. And, I spent a lot of time in the school really making sure that women and minorities saw that they could have a career in cyber, in tech, and a real successful career, and that it was a great place to be. And I think that we need to do more of that and really encourage our leaders of tomorrow to look at other alternatives in the career fields, not just a lawyer, not just an engineer, not that engineering is bad, or not just a doctor, but that there are other alternatives, and they're great career fields that will give them a really promising career in the future.
A great outlook. And I know Meredith shared some insight on this on our other discussion. So that'll lead me to Meredith. Can you weigh in on the question at hand as well?
Of course. And I think I echo everything that Nicole stated. And I think that the visibility is important, definitely. And I know I spend a lot of time and energy doing that. But where I try to really focus my discussions with the young people is around the different industries that they don't really understand that there is a tech component to just about every industry that we have. Whether you are in legal, there is a tech component. If you're in healthcare, there's a tech component. If you work for manufacturing, it's a tech component. So with me being in healthcare IT pretty much my entire 26, 27 year career, when I have these conversations with students and they ask me, well, what do you do? And I'll say, I take care of patients. And they're looking at me like, well, are you a doctor? Are you a nurse? And I'm like, no, I'm not any of those things. But if I don't do my job well in my space, then those people who are blessed to be clinicians and take care of patients or create medicines or whatever it is that they do in that space won't be able to do their job to the fullest. So at the end of the day, I am taking care of patients in an indirect manner. And then it sparks this conversation around the fact that you actually have technologists that work for healthcare. Some kids don't even have the concept that there is a tech component. So I think that we have to break open these industries a little bit for the kids and help them to imagine or reimagine what they believe a career in this space looks like. I think the other part of it is we get to them early, we monitor them and manage them throughout their developmental career as their students and things of that nature. But I think that we have to do a greater job at engaging with these universities. And as much as I, love higher education, when we look at some of these programs that have been established over the years, and I think that they've gotten better over time, but I think that we as the practitioners in this space have to help them construct curriculums that really are applicable to that student coming out of school and being able to hit the ground running. Therefore, they can really be productive and valuable right on the onset. So a lot of that can't be just, I'm going to teach you cybersecurity from a theory perspective, but how do you give them access to lab environments where they can actually hone their skills? And sometimes without us walking in the room and telling these curriculum boards that, or these advisory boards the universities have, they can't conceive of that. So I think that there's another part of this that we have to do in order to prepare those students appropriately, so they can hit the workforce on the ground running.
I agree completely, especially in terms of higher education and making it more of a focal point, and the diversification within cybersecurity and IT. There's so many different principles and so many different disciplines within the field itself.
Yes.
Gary, can you please share some of your thoughts on the matter?
Love the conversation. Agree with everything that's said before. I'll give a little different spin to it as I kind of think about the question. Mentorship. I think mentorship is a key component, because we kind of talked about already. They need to see somebody that looks like them that's doing it now. I spent a lot of time over the last, 5-10 years with Big Brothers Big Sisters program. And right now within Carnival, we have a program. We have almost 200 kids in high school that we touch once a month and get a chance to kind of talk to them about career. But going into elementary schools, going into high schools, one of the things I start talking to the kids about is I tell them I work for Carnival Cruise Line. And I said, what does that mean for you, right? What kind of job do you think I have there? And I'll get everything from, somebody that cooks in the kitchen to somebody that's, driving the ship, or you the captain on the ship. And then I said, no, but let me kind of describe a little bit what I do. And I said, prior to this job, I worked for a grocery store. I worked for a pharmacy company. I worked for a bank, right? And then, I kind of go through my career of the companies and the verticals that I touch. Back to Meredith's, comment, IT goes across all of them. IT security is a highly important thing. And then we get into what security is all about. And it's absolutely a sexy, career, right? That we need to talk about more, right? And show them that here's the steps and the opportunities to get there. There's not a single path. There's multiple ways of kind of get there. And then it's letting them continue to see people, not only at the C-suite that's doing it, but, throughout the career. So, and long-winded, but my oldest son is in the cybersecurity, career, and he's 5 years into it. When he was in college, he said, Dad, I'm trying to figure out what I want to do. I love engineering. I love technology. He had a lot of loves. And he said, I said, well, if you follow your passion, do something that you love, it will never be work. And he said, well, what brought me into technology? And I said, I kind of stumbled into it, right? I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I know what I didn't want to do. But I always loved math. I loved logic. And that's how I kind of bounced my way into it early. And I got lucky. And so he said, I kind of love technology. So that's the path that I want to take. I said, but be ready to work hard, right? Because it's not a set, curriculum. It's not a set path. It's not as mature as some of the other careers that's been around for the last 100 years. And so you got to be, again, comfortable in an uncomfortable situation. So he's kind of I say that for the folks on the phone that, there's multiple paths into it. It's an absolutely sexy career. You get a chance to make a difference for companies, that without you would not be as successful as they are today.
Those are very good points.
Speaking of sexy, we go to Michael because he can surely.
So no, I would just add to build on. I think that exposure piece is extremely critical. for us to be out there to see what the art of possibility is and what the opportunities are. I think a good number of us are just received information on I don't know if it was Hydric, one of the search organizations, their CISO compensation study that just came out.
Yeah.
So this is now an opportunity to make sure that we understand, as well as from an industry, what the art of possibility is, because the compensation and the positioning of this ultimate role. I speak to the board. I'm aligned to the CIO. There's a cybersecurity specific committee, and a Fortune 7 organization, that's on the planet, and that's dwarfing what kind of responsibilities and opportunities that used to exist is only, in some instances, just a CIO or CFO or one of those types of tracks. So I think that building on Gary's point on that sexy piece, this is something to take stock and aspire to. And if you can navigate your way and take the opportunities and kind of travel that road less traveled on some of the opportunities here, there's a lot to be said, and there's a lot of positioning, and even for all of us, kind of those next horizons that you look at is having one of those seats on one of those boards, because you need to have this level of expertise, in any type of corporations, as just Meredith said, because it cuts across any type of an industry, any type of a vertical, and cyber is not going anywhere. Trust us.
Right.
Well, with that in mind, I want to pose a secondary question to you, Gary, in terms of earning stripes and the different aspects of information security. What business areas, I want everyone to weigh in, I want to get your perspective, what business areas or business functions within security were most beneficial to you for your career to get here? Was it data privacy? Was it the compliance component? Was it, Python code? I see Nicole looks like she's chomping at the bit to answer this, but I'm going to leave with you on this one, Gary.
Yeah, so let me spin a different way on the question. I'm always believe that you need to be an expert in something and a generalist in a lot of things. So for me, it was network security was my in, where I kind of started and became really proficient in it. But that just got me to become the smart guy on the block, right? So it wasn't for me, it wasn't an IT security role that really was that accelerator for me. It was actually something outside of IT security. And it was one of those big moments that we have in our career. And it was a Six Sigma for me. So back in my GE days, Six Sigma was hot, trying to change the business, looking for quality ways of designing as well as improving existing processes. I got an opportunity and tapped on the shoulder to run quality or run Six Sigma for all IT for GE Healthcare. The CIO tapped me on the shoulder, said, you do an outstanding job, in the security for me. You really get that, but I believe you can be bigger than that and do more and understand more of the business side of it. I said no to him twice. I always had an excuse that one more thing I want to learn, one more thing I want to get done, one more project I have to get, want to get implemented. And after the second time of telling him no, he came back one more time, and not many bosses come back 3 times. And it was interesting. I tell the story. He tapped me on the shoulder and said, Gary, I'm going to introduce you to Steve, and Steve is your replacement. So that was the eye-opening for me. I said, well, if he's my replacement, where am I going? I thought you loved me. He said, well, I do. And remember that job I talked to you about doing? That's where you're going. You can't give me any more excuses. I got your replacement right here. So Six Sigma and quality truly pulled me out of the technical depth aligned to your question, but it drove me down being the expert in solving business problems, solving customer problems, solving technology problems, finance problems. And so it just made it wider for me of opportunities.
Fantastic points. So that's what directed you, obviously, to get into the role you're in now. So someone had to push you out of the technical piece to get you into the business side.
Yeah.
So Nicole, I saw you were eager to jump in earlier, so I'll leave with you on this one now too.
So I was not, but it kind of looked like it. I was just engaging, right? So I will certainly say that I was an enterprise architect. So I was technical, but I was working more on business processes and really solutions. And I was recruited for another role, and I was in the federal government, so I was at the highest levels I could be. And they needed somebody to do Sarbanes-Oxley for the government. So it was SOX for the government. And I was like, oh, absolutely not. Like, me? No, I'm not doing that. And I remember my boss calling me in the office and saying, so you're a best person. We need you to do this. This is our first time doing SOX. We've never done it before. So we need you to come in. You have a process background. You could really help us here. And I said, oh, absolutely not. I'm not going to do it. I don't think I have the right skill set. You know, I really like the role I'm in. I'm really just kind of getting my feet wet. And she said, no, you start tomorrow. And so here I am doing Sarbanes-Oxley for the government. So when I think about the path, number one, typically, especially in security, somebody pushes you, especially as early as possible. Like, there was no cybersecurity, right? So somebody had to guide you there. And typically it was an assignment that you took that really kind of helped you understand that IT security or cybersecurity world. And that's kind of what happened to me. Because after when I successfully completed, the Sarbanes-Oxley work, then that's when I was asked to build my first cybersecurity program. So one of the first programs for the federal government. So imagine, I'd been in DOD before, so I saw it done, well. So to do it in the federal government was a treat. And it was interesting because, if you're really good at solving problems, people will direct you to problems. Right? And they're going to direct you to things that have never been solved before. So typically I was the first. And that's kind of what happened to me. And so there is no one road to the C-suite or even to being a CISO, right? So there are different roles and different paths that lead you there, whether you're in compliance or, maybe you're a data protection expert or you're in security operations. But I think one key thing to note is that and Gary said it best, you have to understand the industry. I think you have to have a business lens to the work that you do. You have to understand risk, right? And so you just have to understand, like, across an organization, how a company makes money, right? And how do they stay successful? And if you can get those skills, I think you can get to the C-suite, wherever you happen to be. So I always say that, like, there's not one way, because people ask that question, like, how did you become a CISO? I'm like, listen, my path may be different than yours. So, take the path that you believe is right for you, learn the skills, but remember, it's that upper level or that upper layer of business acumen that you're going to have to gain to be a successful CISO.
Thank you for that, Nicole. Michael, do you mind sharing?
Sure. My path was, a little bit more opportunistic, I would say, but based on a lot of the foundation that you just heard, with Nicole and with Gary, definitely. And so I came from the product and the business side. And so in the organization that I was in, I had managed, the development teams and the software solutions for every product line that we had. And after being passed over by the finance person for the VP role to take on a product space as an officer, that was like, this is enough. So it was working then with a little bit of, and we talked about mentors at the time, the chief marketing officer, because I was in the product management development organization. And the customer is the first in the business perspective that I approached it. So our customers was facing financial services from an industry perspective, and data protection and security was the way in. And so I was asked, or raised my hand, or whatever you want to call it, to develop the business case for how that organization was going to approach, security. And I pulled in what was our internal IT security team, the privacy office, the data protection, model. But there was also a little bit of a twist to it, because I still had P&L responsibilities that I augmented with it. And we had developed a relationship, with a third party organization. So as we went and proposed for Graham Leach Bliley, which was the act for the financial services around privacy and the protection of data, we also had a business, element, to that. And in that particular, vantage, that's how I was able to initially, get in. But just as Gary and Nicole stated, you have to follow where that opportunity is. It was so new. And then when I took my next assignment and opportunity, at Pitney Bowes, that opportunity was back in leading the development team, in the managed service organization that they had. But because of that experience, the general counsel immediately, again, asked me to develop and build the security program. And so ever since then, I've been in that particular, path. And so from the opportunity, the business perspective, and then also looking at how you can uniquely, place the value and the value that you have from your, personal aspirations and experiences to kind of tweak and make the uniqueness that you have to, for that particular role, I think is a critical, area of focus for everybody.
These are all fantastic points, and you, all of you, almost answered my final question. But I want Meredith to close us out before I ask the final question, as we get into closing at the top of the hour here. So, Meredith, what business unit or business function did you find most valuable in your career path?
Yeah, so for me, it seems like the areas of regulatory, compliance, legal, risk, and how that is kind of threaded through technology has always been the point, for the jumping point for me. I happen to have worked for companies that were creating products, whether it's from an application development perspective or a data analyst perspective, data protection perspective. So we were always in a place to create products that met a regulatory need of some sort. So once we got to the point where we did not blow up the world after Y2K, the next big thing after that was HIPAA. And so working in the healthcare space, I ended up in a chief privacy officer role, actually building from the ground up a privacy program for a major healthcare system out of Detroit. And then once we got probably 2 years into it, the second part of that HIPAA rule came out, which was HIPAA security. So that was how I got inserted into the security pieces of it. We found that the program that we had existing at the time was creating immense privacy exposure for us, and there was no synergy between those two areas. So Henry Ford did something very bold and came to me and said, you are technical, because I do have a technical background. You're technical, but you also understand the business, you understand risk, you understand compliance, and you know how legal drives from a law, regulatory, federal or state, drives what we do in our space. And so we need someone to kind of help us with that. Will you take on security too? So I became the chief privacy officer and the chief information security officer for the same organization, which was a ton of fun, because if you talk about sexiness, it brought a whole lot of sexy to the table, right? But then after that, now I work for Eli Lilly. I've been with them for the last 2 years. I have dropped the privacy side of my world and have just focused now in the security space. but still privacy is near and dear to me. But I would say that was my introduction, but it was mostly regulatory, legal, compliance risks, things of that nature.
All right. So now that that's great, because now I think we have a lot of folks from an attendee perspective want to understand what career path you guys took to get to the positions you're in. And this actually leads to my final question as we get to a close here. I'll start with you on this one, Michael. What's one piece of advice you can offer young African Americans who are either considering entering the cybersecurity field or seek to obtain more senior positions? I know you all touched on this, but
Right.
Strong whole piece of advice as we come to a close.
So a couple of key factors. I think to build on what Gary said, the mentoring, and in addition to mentoring, appropriate sponsorship. So reach out, make sure, and you can have a whole different panel and discussion on the distinction between the two. But you need to make sure that you have alignment from a mentoring perspective and getting that exposure. And so all of us clearly are in a position and need to make sure that we're giving back and doing that particular mentoring. And then for me, the other critical piece, and again, I can only, put my money where my mouth is that shameless plug, but you will see, at least from a potential director and above positions, that as I'm looking at the appropriate alignment within the organization that I have, check out McKesson. I would love to have the people that's, on, the dialed into this panel, because I'm looking at giving, strong opportunities for African Americans, and specifically those in Hispanics and women. So, and across a number of the variety of fields that we're talking about here in terms of the different experiences. So, for me, it's one, making sure that there's that networking, mentoring capabilities, and walking the talk by making jobs and opportunities for people to try to tap into.
Much appreciated, especially the recruiting plug. That's great to hear, because you guys are actually, like you said, putting your money where your mouth is. I'll jump over to Meredith as one piece of advice as we come to a wrap.
I think my piece of advice would be get comfortable with the uncomfortable. This is not, if you have soft skin, a bruised ego easily and things of that nature, this is not the role for you. It is challenging. You have to be comfortable having difficult conversations. So that right level of emotional intelligence to be able to move through those things, I think is my one piece of advice. This is not easy. And I'm not going to say that it's easy. It's a difficult job, but it's a job that I love, and I would do it. If I didn't get paid, I would still want to do it. I love this stuff. But you have to be prepared to fight the right battles, and you have to be prepared to stand on what you believe is right for your organization, which sometimes is not going to be what the business and or what others may want. So you can't, kind of tamp yourself down. You have to stand strong if you're going to be in a role like this.
Appreciate that. Now, Gary, one piece of advice you want to share with the overarching community?
Yeah, so Meredith, I love my job too, but I don't know if I'm gonna do it for free. Just in case my employer is on the phone listening. As I kind of think about it, it's a couple things I'll give in parting thoughts. One of the best practices that I typically do, and it's helped me throughout my career, a couple things. And we got 109 people now on the video conference. And so it's a great thing to think about for yourself also. Take some time, if you haven't, and most of us don't, look at your company's 10K, right? It gives you an opportunity to understand what's important to them, right? And then try to connect yourself into projects, into initiatives, into strategy that's important to them, because that's where they're throwing their money. That's where they're banking their future at. And you want to be able to drive value for your company in the way that they're going. And if you're able to do that, you'll see those career accelerators, right? That'll take you along the way there. And then last but not least, mentor, mentor, mentor. So go out and mentor somebody, and go out and ask for somebody to mentor you, because it'll bring somebody with you along, and it'll help accelerate your career.
Thank you for that. Nicole, can you close us out, please?
Yeah, there's just so many little nuggets I want to provide to people. If I could be like 20 years younger, this is what I would say to myself, right? I'd say every day will be different, right? This is not an easy job. I will tell you, it is challenging. And each one of my colleagues will certainly, we all have horror stories and war stories, but we've survived, right? I think sponsorship is important. Find a sponsor, because you need somebody to advocate for you at the top. Take challenging roles and take risks, because that's really how your career path will continue to progress and you'll see success. Stay connected and network, right? I think networking is a key, especially when you're in a role like this. You need to have a support system, and you need people that you can lean on. So stay connected, make sure that you have a tight network, and feedback is a gift. Young people, feedback is a gift. It's there to help you to get better. Accept feedback from the top, the bottom, and on the sides, right? Because all it will do is help you to achieve your goals.
This has been an amazing session. I appreciate the panelists. Thank you for your amazing perspective. I'll have a closing thought. As we know, within the industry of cybersecurity, underrepresentation is extremely unfortunate. And especially in today's climate, racial tensions are at the forefront of our nation's mind. And what we discussed today, the easiest thing to do would be to hire more minorities and call it a day, right? The reality is that diversity only succeeds as a business priority when leaders also make it a priority to promote inclusion. Diversity without inclusion leads to a revolving door of talent. And I think, with the mentorship and the sponsorship, these are amazing takeaways. And I hope everyone who attended take away from today's discussion that diversity attracts a wider range of experiences to think more creatively, drive innovation, develop creative problem-solving skills, and develop and push people to look at old challenges from a new perspective. This allows to avoid biased decision-making. For those who are interested, I will be posting on my LinkedIn other resources that the panelists have provided. If you want for programs that promote diversity and inclusion, you can donate your time and resources. I want to commission all C-levels, board members, and VCs to consider practices which promote diversity and inclusion as steps which promote leadership and excellence within the cybersecurity industry. That'll be my final note. I want to thank my panelists, thank everyone for attending. I look forward to how far we've come in the coming months in terms of the discussion today. Thank you all. Have a good evening. Take care.